Sunday, 7th of March 1965. I woke up to see my adorable little Adam staring at me from the black and white picture by my bedside. Well, strictly speaking, it was cut from the middle spread of Melody Maker. Oh, my gorgeous, perfect boy. I was a shy teenager, average size, but as father repeatedly told me, a bit of puppy fat. I'd sketched a picture of him in my diary. A tall, thin, cold, critical man who was stuck in a time warp. "You were a mistake, Linda. You spoilt our perfect marriage. Sit up straight, Linda. Don't talk with your mouth full, Linda. Look at you. You eat too many cakes and biscuits, Linda." I'd been hearing stuff like that all my life. He never cuddled me, never kissed me. Mum didn't much either. Well, not in front of him anyway. How could I feel close to him? But he seemed good enough to Mum, and I hope he loved me in his own way. Dad didn't like me going out with friends on Sundays. "It's the Lord's Day, my girl, a day for our family." The house was always quiet. Rules had to be kept. No pop music, no mess, a place for everything. But things were different then. Wednesday, April the 14th. As usual, I was reluctant to go home, but it was Wednesday, our special fun day. I walked the 3 miles from school via the High Street and met up with some of the gang in the Wimpy Bar. We larked about, joking with each other. I remember I had a strawberry milkshake and a rhubarber before running all the way home. I just made it before Dad came in, so I was all right. If he knew I was messing around in the High Street, I'd be for it. A dinner of meat and 2 veg was promptly on the table at 6 o'clock, same as always. Mum was a very traditional 1950s housewife, and of her rather basic offerings, we had my favourite, toad in the hole, which was about as adventurous as it got. I can still only really cope with plain cooking to this day. My early experiences being Mum's cooking or school dinners of meat pie with soggy pastry, wet cabbage and spotted dick and custard. Took me ages to work out that the disgusting brown lumps which swam around in the custard like shark's fins were actually clumps of custard powder. Wednesday, 21st of April. I wrote, "Today was brilliant." In the Wimpy, I noticed a new boy a few tables down from ours. He had fair hair in a mod style and looked a bit like Adam Faith. He was my pin-up, remember? He glanced over whilst my eyes were fixed on him, and I felt myself colour up. And on his way out, he knocked my shoulder with his school bag. I tingled all over, my toes curled up, but I didn't think he'd give me a second glance. The following week, me and my friend Jenny bounced in as usual, and there he was again, my very own pin-up. My heart melted. I found myself getting distracted from my schoolwork more and more, daydreaming about you-know-who, and constantly writing Nick all over me exercise books. All the girls did, but it had never happened to me before. A couple of weeks went by, and dream boy Nick said hello to me. Yes, to me. He must have noticed I fancied him, but I didn't see him again for a while, until the day he asked if he could walk me home. Wednesday, May the 12th, 1965. The most memorable sunny day, the day my fate was truly sealed. I'll never forget it. It felt like the world stopped in that moment and I was instantly in love, and it happened. You know, we did it. It really did feel like the swinging 60s had begun for me. I was so happy lying in his arms afterwards on the warm grass near the seesaw by the wreck. Things were different then. Friday, 18th of June. My last exam today, and leaving school celebrations. We all wrote on our blouses. I should have been happy, but I knew I'd probably messed up my O-levels and wasn't sure what would happen about our get-togethers now. I soon found out. Nick stopped coming to the Wimpy Bar, even though I went every Wednesday for weeks, desperate to see him. He never called me and he never came round. He never told me where he lived. I didn't know his friends, and although I tried to find him, I lost contact. I couldn't believe he would do that. How could he? My very first love. I let him take me, and he just dropped me like a stone. Monday, August 16th. Exam results day. I wasn't interested in rushing to get the post. I stayed in my room, feeling down, moping about. I hadn't seen much of my friends since I left school. I felt embarrassed, a fool and a failure. Mum brought the letter up to me to open, and as I suspected, it wasn't good news. I only managed a couple of passes and the rest were rubbish. Of course, Dad was not happy. When he got home, I heard him stomp up to my room. He usually knocked, but not that day. He just burst in. "Linda, your exam results are a disgrace. I am so disappointed in you. This lazing around has got to stop. You must back your ideas up. Get out, look for a job. You're not a schoolgirl anymore, so you must contribute to the household. I'm sure you could find a position somewhere despite being a bit plain and overweight." That was my father. To drown my sorrows, I started comfort eating. To cheer me up, Mum baked some of my favourite cakes. She was worried about me. I didn't care about getting fatter. Well, nobody fancied me anyway. I started to feel odd, different, a bit sick. I thought it was all the sweet stuff I was eating. I didn't understand what was happening to my body. I wasn't very up on what you did or didn't do with boys. No one talked about that kind of thing then. Sex education consisted of one film in biology about a pig embryo. Sounds unbelievable now, but things were different then. Friday, August 20th. My friend Jenny came round. She said she'd been reading the new Jackie comic, and there was an article about teenage pregnancy. She asked me about my periods. She was worried I could be pregnant. I couldn't believe she could think such a thing. We got embarrassed talking about sex and went back to listening to the Beatles singing "She Loves You" on my pink transistor, tuned into Radio Luxembourg. Eventually, Mum asked if we could talk, and it dawned on me. I must be in the family way, as she put it. Mum was so horrified and distraught about telling Dad. She came out in a nerve rash. I mentioned that Dad was a strict man, didn't I? He'd always kept a tight rein on me going to discos and that, and saying they were dens of iniquity and full of ne'er-do-wells and pills. He meant drugs, of course, like purple arts and beta blockers. And come to think of it, Nick had offered me some pills when we went to the rec that day. He said, go on, they won't hurt you. They really do it for me. I'd stupidly agreed to take just one, and it made me feel really dizzy and lightheaded. I passed through the morning sickness, which made me feel really wretched, and I just felt the quickening, as they called it then, the first signs that the baby was moving. I started showing, as they said, so Mum felt she had no choice but to speak to Dad, and he'd know what was to be done. Oh, dread of dreads, what would he say? Sunday, September the 5th. Our family day again. Oh, bloody hell, what a family, eh? Such a fateful day it was too. Dad summoned me into the dining room. The room was rarely used and smelled of pledge and polish, a smell I'll never, ever forget. He sat behind the table, as if behind a desk. He beckoned me over to stand in front of him. Your mother has informed me of your condition, Linda. I cannot hide my disgust, and I am appalled at what can only be described as your wanton behaviour. He demanded to know whose baby it was, and finally told me. Of course, it is absolutely out of the question for you to keep it. How can you possibly care for an infant at your age? You're not much more than a child yourself, and with no father. I was dismissed, and there would be no further discussion on the subject. To ensure that I was no more embarrassment to the family, I was dispatched 2 weeks later to a mother and baby home on the edge of the Yorkshire moors, over 100 miles from home. But things were different then. Monday, 15th of November. I had written, "This day will be etched on my mind forever." I remember it like it was yesterday. Stepping off the coach after a 6-hour journey, 27 weeks and 5 days pregnant, and struggling the half-mile or so down a narrow lane, carrying my little suitcase, with just a few clothes for me and my baby. Mum had secretly knitted a little matinee jacket in the palest green colour to suit either a boy or a girl. I was so delighted when I found it in my case, and I knew she'd be thinking of me. She wanted to come with me, but Dad wouldn't hear of it. His words on the subject has been, "She made her bed and she can lie on it by herself." I arrived, weary, outside St Saviour's Home for Mothers and Babies. A large old Victorian-looking house, dark grey paint peeling off the eerie pointed windows and rusty drain pipes. A few snowdrops dared to peep out from the frosty soil. I was terrified, my heart pumping inside my chest as I stood on the steps leading to the front door. My legs turned to jelly, wondering what was about to greet me inside. Not the land of Narnia, that was for sure. A pleasant-faced young nun with a weak smile greeted me at the door, and showed me straight up to a dormitory room with a high ceiling, faded floral curtains, several beds. I was sharing with 4 other girls, probably of similar age to me, looking at the personal things on their little cupboards next to their beds. It was all so bleak, like time had stood still in the 1930s. I could have stepped into an old black and white film. The winter wind was blowing and the windows rattled. I thought of Wuthering Heights and Cathy calling for Heathcliff and wondered if I should call for Nick. Surely someone would have told him about the baby. I did my best to settle into my new surroundings, but it was hard. In every sense, it was a long way from what I called home. Even though my parents were quite strict, I'd never encountered anything like the nuns' daily regime. I felt so lost and lonely, and I cried myself to sleep on my little bed. In the morning, I was shown round the nursery. Its rows of little cots, in which nestled these tiny little scraps with unknown futures, some with pink blankets and some with blue. I made a decision that night. I would keep my baby, no matter what my parents said. I'd get home, find a job, and go it alone somehow. I'd grown up with a bang in the last few months. I was 16, and I must be able to get some kind of work. I felt sure that Mum would look after the baby once she got used to the idea, or I'd rent a room for us if I wasn't allowed home. Wednesday, 17th of November. I sat in the common room and watched the snow flatter past the window. A senior sister came in, called my name and marched me off to meet someone she referred to as a child care officer or something. Miss Sterling looked over her glasses as I entered, and Sister Winifred sat down and nodded for me to sit. Miss Sterling had a Scottish accent and I couldn't understand her very well. I thought I heard her say the word adoption. I was shaking my head, but no words were coming out of my mouth. I started to shake inside and out. I couldn't take in what I was hearing. It seemed I wasn't being given the option to keep my baby. Sister Winifred said something about my father having signed some papers, and my fate was sealed from that moment. The words in her lilting Scottish accent echoing round my head. I couldn't see a way out. I felt totally powerless. The plan was for me to stay till the baby is 7 days old, and then baby is to be placed with the adoptive parents. As you are under 18, Miss Barrett, your father has already signed the papers for you. I was in shock. Burning tears started to roll down my cheeks. The room started to swim. The words became muffled. I felt sick. I thought I'd fall off my chair. Miss Sterling turned a form round and asked me to sign it. A formality, I suppose, as with or without my signature, they would take my baby. How could they? My own flesh and blood. On Sunday, 6th of February, 1966, my beautiful baby daughter was born. She looked like a cherub, chubby little face and big blue eyes with wisps of blonde hair. I called her Angela, my very own angel. We bonded quickly. I loved to hold her close, her tiny hand curled around my little finger. On Monday, the 14th of February, they took my beautiful baby away. Yes, they came to take her on 14th of February, Valentine's Day. So cruel. Another fateful day. I ran to the window and watched her being driven away, cradled in someone else's arms. I'd given her a tiny silver bracelet, which I bought for her on a rare trip into town, hoping she'd keep it to remember me by, and a letter that I put in a pink envelope, explaining how much I loved her and wanted to keep her. But things were different then. I've thought about my Angela every day of my life since that day. Did she cry when they took her away? Did she miss me? Did they treat her well? Does she look like me? Does she look like her father? Does she hate me for giving her away? So many questions. Every year I celebrate her birthday and at the same time mourn her leaving. I never spoke to my father again. I could never forgive him for ruining my life. I never blamed my mum. The poor woman had been in his control for years. I never married. I had no wish to replicate their shabby, empty marriage. I wanted no man to control me ever again. I never saw or heard of Nick again. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. He must have found out what happened and wanted no part of it. Well, things were different then. I moved away to start a new life without my baby, without my beautiful, beautiful Angela. Life was hard, but I survived. Every day I wished and hoped to one day find my little angel. For years I searched, wrote letters to the home, the adoption board, anyone and everyone, hoping and hoping, grabbing at the chance to use the internet and Facebook in more recent years, but so far, even that hasn't borne fruit. She's probably changed her name. Maybe she doesn't even know I exist. A life lived with a huge part of you missing. A yearning which never goes away. A desperation which burns a hole right through you. The years are passing by so quickly. My hopes are fading. I suspect I don't have long now. I spend more time now in my room than ever, feeling sorry for myself. Will I ever hear you call me Mummy? I only knew you for one precious week, but I loved you so much. It'll be your birthday tomorrow, my darling. Oh, today I feel so weak, so tired. I feel different. Something's happening. I don't understand. What? I put it down to my condition. If only things were different then.
Linda? You have a visitor, Linda. Says her name is Angela. Linda? Linda?